Welcome to the 7th episode in a Legendarium series about the Wars of the Roses. In this installment, England's last medieval king, we will talk about the short and tragic reign of Richard III, whose attempts at reform were undercut by the probable murder of his nephews. In the summer of 1483, Duke Richard of Gloucester, brother to the dead King Edward IV, pulled off an audacious coup. He pushed aside his widowed sister-in-law Elizabeth Woodville, put his nephews Richard and Edward in the Tower of London, and crowned himself King Richard III. Not long after, both his nephews vanished in one of history's most enduring and infamous mysteries. While there is no clear evidence connecting Richard with the probable murder of the princes, he stood to gain the most, and he did. Richard grew up hardened by the Wars of the Roses. His father and brother died when he was 8 years old. He fought at the Battle of Tewkesbury when he was 18, served as governor of the North, and became king at the age of 30. Richard suffered from scoliosis, which caused one of his shoulders to be slightly higher than the other. Tudor propaganda later turned him into a drooling and hideous hunchback in the belief that a deformed body reflected a deformed soul. In the short term, Richard III, a Yorkist, faced a challenge from the new champion of the fading Lancastrian cause, Henry Tudor. Born in January 1457, Henry Tudor was the grandson of Catherine of Valois, the French-born widow of Henry V, and a Welsh courtier named Owen Tudor. This made him a descendant of John of Gaunt, brother to King Edward III. While Henry Tudor had a weak royal connection, the beaten Lancastrians could do no better than him. So he left Brittany and allied himself with the alienated Woodville family. Henry Tudor also found support from other nobles displeased with Richard's distribution of estates or too uneasy with the matter of the princes to accept Richard as king. Henry's invasion fleet, unfortunately for him, was trapped in port by severe weather as the Duke of Buckingham attempted to raise a rebel army in England. With Henry Tudor stuck in France, Richard III easily crushed and beheaded Buckingham in November 1483. Amidst the anxious whispering about what happened to the princes, Richard III set out to become a reformer king. Richard III set up the Court of Requests, which gave the poor a chance to make appeals for justice which they normally could not afford to make. The Court of Requests would endure until the English Civil War. He also passed a ban on censoring books, effectively allowing the printing and sale of any type of book. To further help the common people in court, he insisted that proceedings be done in English rather than Latin, and took steps to make sure juries wouldn't be intimidated into voting this way or that. He also cracked down on fraudsters, imposing severe penalties on those who sold wine and oil while lying about the actual percentages of wine and oil in their product. These reforms won him much praise from historians at the time, but dynastic issues would undercut Richard's reforms. Richard had one child with his wife, Anne Neville, a son whom they named Edward, the same name as one of the princes in the Tower who vanished. He also had two illegitimate children before his marriage, named John and Catherine, but little is known about them. On April 4, 1484, Edward died at just 10 years old. Queen Anne also died in April 1485, 5 months before Bosworth Field. At the death of his wife Anne, rumors spread that Richard had not only poisoned her, but that he wished to take his niece, Elizabeth of York, as his new wife. These rumors became so prevalent that Richard summoned the Lords of England to a parliament on March 30th, 1485. He not only denied the rumors, but threatened anyone caught spreading those rumors with imprisonment. In truth, Richard III had entered negotiations for a second wife with King João II of Portugal. Richard hoped to marry Zhao's sister, even though she wished to become a nun, which would make marriage impossible. Yet the vicious rumors show how distrusted Richard III had become despite his much-needed reforms. With Richard's heir dead and the nobles grumbling, Henry Tudor sensed a second chance. On August 8, 1485, he landed at Milford Haven in South Wales with an army of 5,000 French mercenaries. Supposedly, the crafty King Louis XI of France emptied the prisons of Paris to help fill Henry Tudor's ranks. As he marched, Henry Tudor found several powerful allies who swelled his ranks further. Richard III confronted Henry at Bosworth Field in Lancashire on August 22, 1485, with twice as many men. But at the last moment, the Earl of Northumberland deserted, refusing to engage his troops until he had a clear idea of who would win. With either great courage or great desperation, Richard III ordered his army to charge and personally led the cavalry in a forceful charge that had the goal of killing Henry Tudor with his own sword. Richard III, a veteran of many battles, killed Henry's standard-bearer and came within a sword length of Henry Tudor himself. Yet his luck ran out. A Welshman named Rhys ap Thomas struck the king's head with a halberd so hard that Rhys drove Richard's helmet into his skull. Studies of Richard's skeleton show that he suffered 4 injuries on the top of his skull, 1 dagger blow on the cheekbone, 2 injuries on the base of his skull, and a final wound on his pelvis, likely inflicted after death. He spoke a single word in his final moments: treason! At the Battle of Bosworth, Richard III became the last king of England to die in battle. In 2012, an expedition found the remains of Richard III on the former grounds of Greyfriars Church, his body found under a reserved parking space appropriately marked R. Yet in 1485, the victorious Henry Tudor marched to London, where he would be crowned King Henry VII. Along the way, Henry Tudor disrobed Richard's body and dragged him behind a horse before he allowed him to be interred at a royal tomb. That wraps things up for this episode of The Legendarium. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, press like. If you want to see more, press subscribe. And if you've got anything to say, let me know in the comments section. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope that you have a great rest of the day.